All right, so we're doing a little bit more review for the algebra manipulation test. That test is coming for my kids on Monday. I know if you're listening to this recording, you could be from any one of the pre-calc teachers' classes, and maybe you already took this test, but maybe you did bad and you want to have another chance to learn this stuff. So here are the things you'll need to know, at least some of them. We don't go over everything you need to know, but here's some of the main skills you got to know how to do. All right, on this one, how do you start? Can you split it up? Because it is an absolute value, and you will split it up. You split it up right away? No. Go ahead. Start by adding 4 to both sides, etc. Okay, so I hope you added 4 to both sides and you add this. Right? And then what? Divide by 3. X minus 3 is equal to 6. And then what? Split it. X minus 3 equals 6, and x minus 3 equals negative 6. And now what? Solve them. Add 3. Add 3. X equals 9. Add 3. Add 3. Carefully over here. X equals negative 3. A negative 6 and a positive 3 makes negative 3. Now, could it be that I've done all the rules right and yet those might not work? Yeah, you really should check. Now, on the test, a few kids burned themselves by taking the answers, checking them, and then they thought they didn't work when they really did work. Okay, so be careful. Before you say something's extraneous, think to yourself, is the answer rounded? Is this rounded in any way? No. If you've got a decimal off of a graph, is it very possible that that's a rounded answer? And if it's rounded, it won't work perfectly in the equation. So don't use that as a, like, oh, I checked it and it didn't work. Well, it's because you rounded it, and that's why it doesn't work. All right, but this is a whole number, so it should just work. 9, if I stick it in here, 9 minus 3 is 6. Absolute value of 6 is 6 times 3 is 18 minus 4 is 14. So it worked. And the other one will work too. So there we go. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Good. Moving on. Try this one. If this had been a graphing test, I would just graph it. But since it's not a graphing test, I can't graph it. And that brings up an important point. Can you use a calculator at all on Monday? Yes, you can, but it has to be a non-graphing calculator. Okay, I know a lot of kids are going to come to class and they'll have their graphing calculator, and there will be many tears and gnashing of teeth because they won't be able to use their graphing calculator. That if they had brought a regular calculator, they'd be able to use that. Okay, so if I were you, I would bring a regular calculator. Because why? Otherwise, a kid who could cheat really easily by just graphing this, seeing where it crossed, and know what the answer is. And then algebraically, they could be shown a bunch of junk and get to the right answer because they really knew it from a graph. So if I were you, I would write yourself a note, maybe big, on the top of a page that you're going to see over the weekend, like to put regular calculator in backpack. You know what I mean? All right, you already got one? Excellent. Okay. 17 minus 1, 16. And now I divide by 4 on both sides. Notice I'm showing all my work, like a good math teacher should. And I come to this part, and it tests me on, do I know how to handle reducing big fractions? I do. 4 goes into everything here. Here and here and here, so I can cancel it. And if I wasn't sure about that, I could test it with like whole numbers off to the side of my paper. And could I cancel all these and turn them into ones? Yeah, I could, because 8 over 4 would be 2. And 1 plus 1 over 1 would also be 2. So yeah, I can cancel things like that. So 4 goes in here once, 4 goes in here once, and 4 goes in here twice. No, 4 times, thank you. And now I have x plus 4 over 1, which is just x plus 4. So much simpler than that 4x plus 16 over 4 thing. All right, now, how do I fix it? I got a square root to fix. Square both sides. And this is another opportunity to, like, a little piece of math knowledge you need to have is that when you square both sides, that will fix square roots. You do not need an absolute value. That's if you took a square root of both sides. So it's just plain old x minus 2, not the absolute value there. And here, don't put x squared plus 16 or I'll have to beat you with a trout. Instead, or a herring. Instead, do that. Now the next little thing, I think of this sometimes like a workout at a gym. And you get done on the abs machine, you just did all these like sit up like things, and then you got to get up and move to the next machine, and it's like the curls, and you're working on the curls. Now it's a different kind of a problem. It's not foiling anymore. That was the little workout we just did, first outside, inside, last. Okay, now it's all about getting stuff onto one side because it's a quadratic and you got to get it equal to 0. That's how you solve quadratics, is get them so they're all on one side. X squared, and this 8x, taking away x from both sides, makes it 7x. And then to get the 2 to the other side, I add 2 to both sides. So I got plus 18. And now it's set equal to 0. And I know something about solving quadratics. You can graph them. Why is that useless? It's not, can't graph. Okay, so how else can you solve them? Quadratic formula, very good. Because this one you might think it would factor, it doesn't factor. So if you could factor it, that would be awesome. You could get like this, then your answers come really quick and easy. Otherwise, use the quadratic formula. I'm going to pause for just a second here. Back from the break. All right, here is the x equals negative b. And then in this case, what's negative b? Negative 7. Plus or minus square root of 7 squared, which is 49. Minus 4ac, 4 times 1 times 18. All over 2a. 2 times 1 is 2. There we go. Does anybody notice anything about square root yet? It's going to come out negative. What happens when the square root comes out negative? That means, crackly mic, that means that my answer, anytime it's got a negative underneath there, it won't be real. It'll be imaginary. Okay, so what do you do then? Just say no real answers. That's good enough. The only way we'd expect you to do one of these is if it came out like this. Know why? Because the square root of negative 25 is something we have taught you. What is the square root of negative 25? 5i. And then you could write the answer like this. That's the only exception, is if the number comes out so nice that you can do that to it. All right. So this tests so many things. It's like so many different workouts in the gym. At first, you got to know how to just get stuff, isolated so that square root's alone. And then you got to know how to square both sides. And then you got to know how to FOIL. And then you got to know how to factor to see if it factors, and it doesn't factor. And then you got to know the quadratic formula. That's why this class is hard, not because each problem is impossible, because it has you have to know 6 different things to get to the answer. And it's like going to 6 different stations in the gym, and if you got one thing you can't do, you're not going to be able to pass. To get into the military academies, I don't know if anybody's interested in getting into West Point or into the U.S. Air Force Academy. They're ranked right up there with the top 10 colleges in the nation. They're ahead of Harvard and Yale for quality of education. But you have to not only be good at you're adding and subtracting in school, but you have to pass a physical test. And if there's any part of the physical test you can't pass, then you can't get in there. So you have to be in really good physical shape too. That would be sort of like this if you were really amazing, but you have no vision in one eye, for instance, or something. That's going to cause you to not be able to get into the academy. They actually can do waivers if there's certain things, like you have one thing that's just not right and everything else was okay. you can get a waiver from like a official that says this person is so high quality that we're going to take them even though they don't normally qualify. But okay, so on the math test, you have to be able to do lots of different things. Do you know there's a machine that this guy made that would give you a all body workout at the same time? Like you get into it, and what you do inside this machine causes you to like work out every muscle like at the same time, instead of just like running and you're just working your legs, or instead of like lifting like this and you're just working your biceps. It like works all the different muscles at the same time, and you can do like a 10-minute on this machine, 10-minute workout, and you have just worked out your entire body in 10 minutes. That's a cool idea. I mean, if you can just do one workout that's 10 minutes and really intense, that'd be a pretty awesome way to get into shape. Just 10 minutes. You'd probably come out of there like ready to die, but at least you'd be done with your workout for the day. Okay, these problems are kind of like that. You're doing all this math all at once, and if you make one mistake, it doesn't work. Okay, here's another one. This one's got an added fun of being a inequality, which means when you get your answers, you're going to have to graph them and see which interval works and which one doesn't. Okay, I'm going to get started after now. I gave you a little head start. Everything looks so beautiful, but I did something wrong. Did anybody do it smarter than me? Yes, sir? Aha! Absolute value right there. You need an absolute value because you did a square root on both sides. Anytime you do a square root to both sides, you need an absolute value around your variable. I'll give you the simplest case of that. If you were going to do this, square root, and you'd have x equals 4 if you didn't do it right. Because the original problem should have two answers, shouldn't it? 4 and negative 4. That's why it's supposed to have absolute values, and that'll give you both answers. X is 4, and x is negative 4. Okay, so split it now. X minus 7 less than or equal to 5. X minus 7 greater than or equal to negative 5. Add 7 to both sides. X less than or equal to 12. Add 7 to both sides. X greater than or equal to 2. I could just see a kid stopping right there, and I did, unfortunately, on the test. A lot of kids did just stop right there. And on the test, there were 2 problems like this that had inequalities. And you should have kept going. Why? Because your answer is a range of numbers. It's not just 2 numbers, it's a range. So it's like, is it the numbers between 2 and 12? Or is it the numbers bigger than 12 and less than 2? So you can look at those signs, but I wouldn't always just trust them. It does say x is less than or equal to 12, so it's probably going this way from the 12. And x is greater than or equal to 2, which is going this way from the 2. So it's probably in between those 2, but I would check. So does the 2 itself work? Yes, because it says or equal to. And both of them work. Now, if I check in between, I could check some number like 10 and stick a 10 in and see if it works. 10 minus 7 is 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 plus 7 is 34. Is 34 less than 82? Yep, so it works. So I tested something in here, and it works. And now my final answer is 2 to 12 brackets, and I was kind of risking it there because maybe it works here too. So I should really check the number like 13. Maybe it works here too. I should really check a number like 1 or 0 and make sure it doesn't work there. All right. Raise your hand if you had the same thing as me, 2 to 12. All right. When you get that kind. Next kind. Factor this one. Again, if it was graphing a test, I'd just graph it. I'd just See where it touches the y equals 0, which is the x-intercepts. But it's not a graphing test, so I got to be able to handle it other ways. X squared comes out of everything. And I have x squared plus 2x plus 1. Did anybody go farther than that? Good. That look right so far? Okay. Now I'm going to get 2 answers. In fact, I'm going to get 4 answers. What could that be in there that would make this whole equation equal 0? 0. So it's x equals 0 and x equals 0. Why is there 2 of them there? Because it's an x squared. Now, do you really have to list both answers? No. But I'm explaining it this way because later on, when we get deeper into pre-calc, you're going to have to know that that's actually a double root. It's a double answer. And in this one, it's x equals -1 would make it work, and x equals -1 again. It's a double root, which means that on the graph of this thing, I would know that it would be a bounce at 0 and a bounce at -1. And it would bounce here, boing, and it would bounce there, boing, and it would go back up again, kind of like a W. All right, so I know that about the graph because I know, well, I know stuff you're going to know by the end of pre-calc. All right, so this is actually 4 answers, and that makes sense because it's to the 4th, and there should be 4 answers. All right? Now, isn't it kind of true that there's only 2 answers? Yeah, I would accept just those 2. You don't have to write them twice. But that's why this is supposed to have 4 answers, and it does. It's just that 2 of them are repeated. Okay, so anyway, I've got my 2 answers now, and I just got to double check and make sure I'm doing it right. I look and make sure there's no inequality sign. Yep, there isn't. If there was, I'd have to make a number line and everything. And then I should really just make sure that these work. If I stick in a 0 and a 0 and a 0, it's going to be 0. That worked. Check, that works. And this -1. When I stick in the -1, -1 to the 4th is +1. Plus -1 to the 3rd is -1 times 2 is -2. Plus -1 squared is +1, and that equals 0, and that actually does equal 0. So I double checked it, and it works. Both answers are double checked. There we go. Raise your hand if you had the same thing as I did. All right, moving on. We're getting near October, which is the spooky month. So I thought I'd make a creepy slide. Do you guys know what the font is? If you ever want a good font for like creepy things, like for Halloween time? I didn't know until I made this. Chiller. There's a font called Chiller. Chiller. Like that was a chilling breeze. Anyway, Chiller font is pretty good for this. So watch out, whenever you take a square root on both sides, you're going to be gooned by the Grim Reaper if you don't remember what? Absolute values. If you take a square root on both sides, you got to put absolute values. Next thing, watch out for absolute values or square roots equaling negative values, like this. If you ever saw this, big warning, because you're going to like think, oh, normal problem, split it up in 2 things, I get 2 answers, but what would happen? It wouldn't work. Why? Because you can't have an absolute value come out negative. It's not possible. There are no solutions that will work. All right, next thing. Watch out for square roots equaling negatives, like this. Again, it seems like you should just square both sides, and you'll get an answer, and your answer will be totally wrong. You can catch these by just checking your answers. If you take your answer and you stick it back in, you make sure it works, that'll fix this. But if you ever have a square root equaling a negative, you cannot have a square root equal a negative. So these both would be no solution. That means the solution set to the given problem is empty. Except it's really fast to write. Woo, it's kind of fun. Okay, watch out for the solution that isn't really a solution. What are they called? extraneous. All right. So there's some spooky things to watch out for. All right, moving on. Here is a big old triangle. Looks like a word problem to me. How do I suggest you always start them? Drawing a picture. Everybody, get some paper out if you haven't already. Draw me a picture. Label it with what you know. And be careful that at the end, you don't just like solve your equation, but you answer the question. What is its perimeter? Don't do that until the very end, but when you're all done finding out how long the sides are, you don't want the side. You want the perimeter, which is all the sides added up. I betcha. And there's only 5 kids in here that get this right. Give it a shot. Okay, I'm going to try to catch up to you here. I hope you said this was x and this is 5x because it's 5 times taller. All right, then it's about area, so I'm going to write an area formula. Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. 1/2 times base times height. That's, again, one of the reasons this class is kind of challenging. Brings in all this old stuff you're supposed to remember, like that. Okay, now the area is 450 equals 1/2 is 1/2. The base is x, and the height is 5x. And now if I just multiply this all out, 450 equals 1/2 times 5x squared. And then I'd really love it if I didn't have that half in there. How can I get rid of a fraction? Clear the fraction. Do you remember that from the first week? Times everything by 2. Times this by 2, and times that by 2. And that'll make this go away, and that'll be 900 equals 5x squared. And now I can divide by 5. 900 divided by 5, I think, is 180. And then that's like 13.4. And now you just totally forgot a solution. Why? Isn't this the part where I would do a square root on both sides? And then I need an absolute value. But then, I know the negative value won't work, but I need to at least acknowledge that there is a negative value. X is 13.4 and x is negative 13.4. But that one's extraneous because you can't have a negative's length of a side. All right, now, you can feel proud of yourself. You get to this 13.4 and you can be totally wrong because all you did was find one side. I got to find all the sides. Well, this is 13.4 then, and this is 5 times 13.4, which is like 60 or 50, 67-ish. 67 point what? Thank you. And then, how do I find the third side? Pythagorean, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So you square this, you square this, you add them all up, it's this great big number, and then you take the square root of that. Somebody have that yet? 68 point what? Anybody verify that? 3, okay, fine. Don't worry about the rounding. All right, so then basically you add that, you add the 67, and you add the 13.4, and your grand total 60, 120, 130, 145, 48, about 149, 150, something like that. Raise your hand if you got it right. I predicted 5, and there's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good job. All right. In case you're having trouble getting this number right here, we got it by taking this squared plus this squared and then square rooting our answer. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. All right. Whew. There is a typical word problem. What parts do we need to know? We need to know we have a picture. We need to be able to label the picture properly. We need to be able to remember some formulas. And we need to stick the numbers from the picture into the formula. And when it's all said and done, we got to make sure we answered the question. The question was about perimeter. It wasn't about how long is a side. Be careful that you answer the question they ask you, especially on a word problem. All right? So now, I'm curious, how many of you think you got A's on the test I'm about to give back?